The day my son-in-law called me irrelevant at my own 70th birthday dinner, I smiled, picked up my champagne glass, and nodded at the man sitting quietly in the corner. The one holding a manila envelope, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really began. My name is Dorothy. I turned 70 this past spring, and I have lived in the same house in Asheville, North Carolina for 31 years. I raised my daughter, Lily, in that house. I planted the roses along the front walk with my late husband, Gerald. I paid off that mortgage with my own hands, working 22 years as an office administrator for a medical group downtown, coming home tired every single evening, and still making sure there was dinner on the table and laundry folded in the drawers. That house is mine. Every floorboard, every leaky faucet I fixed myself, every coat of paint I rolled on with my own 2 arms. Mine. Lily is my only child. After Gerald passed 8 years ago, it was just the 2 of us, and I thought we were close. She called me every Sunday. She came home for Thanksgiving, without fail. She cried on my shoulder when her first engagement fell apart years ago. I was her mother in every sense of the word, not just biologically, but in the daily, unglamorous, steady way that real motherhood works. Then, she met Marcus. She was 41 when they started dating. I was glad for her. I genuinely was. She had been alone for a long time, and I wanted her to be happy. When she brought him home for the first time, I made pot roast and set the table with the good dishes. I smiled at him. I asked about his work, his family, his life. He was polite enough that evening, quiet, measured, the kind of man who chooses his words carefully. I noticed that he looked around my house with a certain kind of attention. Not the attention of a guest admiring a home, the attention of someone taking inventory. I filed that thought away and said nothing. Over the following months, things shifted in ways that were small enough to dismiss individually but troubling when I added them up. Marcus began coming with Lily on her Sunday visits, which I welcomed. But slowly, those visits changed in texture. He would walk through rooms I hadn't invited him into. He made comments always framed as jokes about the house being too big for one woman. He said once, with a laugh, that a place like this was wasted on someone who just rattles around in it alone. I laughed along because Lily was watching me with this hopeful look, and I did not want to be the mother who made things difficult. But I was paying attention. 6 months into their relationship, Lily called me on a Wednesday, not our usual Sunday, and told me she and Marcus were engaged. I told her I was thrilled. I told her I loved her. I meant it. What I did not expect was the phone call I received from my neighbor Helen 2 days later. Helen is 74, sharp as a tack, and has lived next door to me for 19 years. She told me she had run into Marcus at the coffee shop on Merriman Avenue. She said he was with another man she didn't recognize, and that she had overheard pieces of their conversation before they noticed her. She said Marcus had used the phrase, "once the property transfers." She said he mentioned my name. I thanked Helen and told her I was sure it was nothing. I did not sleep well that night. I want to be clear about something. I am not a suspicious person by nature. I spent most of my adult life giving people the benefit of the doubt, sometimes to my own detriment. I believed in family. I believed that love was demonstrated through patience and generosity. But I had also worked for over 2 decades in an office that processed medical billing, which meant I understood paperwork. I understood what signatures meant. I understood how quickly things could be moved around on paper when someone knew what they were doing. So quietly, without telling Lily, I called my attorney. His name is Robert Finch. He has handled my affairs since Gerald died. I told him what Helen overheard and asked him what I should be watching for. He told me to check whether anyone had pulled my credit. He told me to check the deed on my house. He told me to call him immediately if anything looked unusual. 3 days later, I pulled my credit report. There was an inquiry I did not recognize. It had come from a financial institution I had never done business with, time-stamped 5 weeks earlier, right around the time Lily and Marcus had visited for Easter weekend. My hands were steady when I dialed Robert's number. I do not know how, but they were. Robert moved fast. Within a week, He had uncovered an application for a home equity line of credit in my name that I had never submitted. The signature on the application was close to mine, close enough to fool someone who wasn't looking carefully, but it was not mine. The application had been submitted digitally, and the IP address it came from traced back to a device that had been on my home Wi-Fi network during Easter weekend. I sat with that information for a long time before I spoke it out loud to anyone. My daughter's fiancé had attempted to take out a loan against my house, the one with Gerald's roses out front and 31 years of my life inside it. I did not confront Lily. I did not call Marcus. I did not cry, though I wanted to. Instead, I called Robert again, and I told him I needed to understand everything, every legal option, every protection I could put in place, every step I needed to take to make sure that house stayed in my name and my name alone. We worked for several weeks. We documented everything. We filed reports. We put additional protections on the deed, and then I waited. Now, the birthday dinner. Lily had insisted on throwing me a party for my 70th. She booked a private dining room at a restaurant downtown, a lovely place with exposed brick walls and soft lighting. She invited about 30 people, my old friends from work, a few neighbors including Helen, my sister Patricia and her husband, cousins I hadn't seen in years. She seemed genuinely excited about it, and that was the part that hurt most watching her plan this celebration, not knowing what I knew, not knowing what her fiancé had done. I had spoken to Robert that morning. He had arranged for a colleague of his, a quiet man named David, to be present at the dinner, just in case. I wore my blue dress, Gerald's pearl earrings, and I arrived early. Marcus arrived with Lily looking relaxed and easy. He shook hands with people. He laughed at the right moments. He was very good at being charming when it served him. We were about 40 minutes into the evening, between the appetizers and the main course, when it happened. My sister Patricia had just finished telling a story about the two of us as girls, and the table was laughing warmly, and I felt for a moment like everything was fine. Then Marcus set down his drink and said loudly enough that the conversation around him quieted. "You know, Dorothy, now that you're 70, have you thought seriously about what happens to that house? A woman your age, living alone, it's a liability, really. Lily and I have been talking, and we think it would just make more sense for everyone if things were arranged more practically." The table went quiet in the particular way that happens when someone has said something that everyone recognizes as wrong, but no one quite knows how to respond to. I looked at him. I kept my face completely calm, and I said, "Marcus, I'd love to hear more about that. Why don't you tell everyone here what kind of practical arrangement you had in mind?" He smiled. He thought I was inviting him to make his case. "Well," he said, leaning back, "property like that doesn't need to sit idle. If it were in Lily's name and our names, we could actually do something with it. Build something. You could still live there, obviously." He said obviously the way people say it when they mean the opposite. Patricia was staring at him from across the table. Helen had gone very still. "You could still live there," he repeated. "It just makes more sense for the next generation to have control of an asset like that. No offense to you, Dorothy, but at your age—" "At my age, I said. "I've learned to read paperwork very carefully." Something shifted in his expression, just slightly. I reached down to my chair where I had set my handbag, and I nodded toward David, who was standing near the entrance to the private room. He walked over and placed the manila envelope on the table in front of Marcus. "That," I said, "contains documentation of a fraudulent home equity application submitted against my property 5 weeks ago. It contains the IP address from which it was submitted, which corresponds to a device that was on my home network during Easter weekend. It contains a forensic analysis of the signature, which is not mine, and it contains a letter from my attorney confirming that the matter has already been reported to the appropriate authorities." The room was absolutely silent. Marcus looked at the envelope. He did not open it. His face had gone a color I can only describe as gray. "I also want everyone here to know," I continued, in the same tone I would use to discuss the weather, "that my deed has additional protections in place. My accounts have been secured, and my attorney has advised me that I am fully within my rights to pursue this matter to whatever extent I choose. I picked up my champagne glass. Now, I believe Patricia was telling a story about the summer we spent at our grandparents' farm. Patricia, please continue. I don't know how long the silence lasted before people started breathing again. A few seconds. It felt longer. Lily had not said a word. She was sitting very still, looking at the envelope, and then at Marcus, and her face. I will carry that image with me for the rest of my life. It was the face of someone watching a building fall. Marcus pushed back his chair and excused himself from the table. He did not come back. Lily left shortly after. She did not say goodbye to me that night. The weeks that followed were among the hardest of my life. Not because of Marcus, I had no grief for him, but because of Lily. She called me 4 days after the dinner, crying, asking me why I hadn't told her. I told her gently that I hadn't known how, and that I had needed to protect myself first because I wasn't sure who knew what and when. She asked me if I really believed she was involved. I told her honestly that I hoped with everything in me that she wasn't. The investigation that followed determined that Lily had no knowledge of the fraudulent application. What it determined about Marcus was considerably less favorable. It came out that he had done something similar before with an elderly aunt in another state, and that case had been settled quietly. He had targeted women who owned property, women who were alone, women who trusted the people they loved. Lily broke off the engagement. She came to my house on a Sunday, 6 weeks after the birthday dinner, and we sat on the back porch where Gerald and I used to have our morning coffee. She held my hand, and we didn't talk for a while. Then she said, "I'm so sorry, Mom." And I told her what I believed then and believe now, that she had nothing to be sorry for, that loving someone who turned out to be dangerous is not a moral failure, that the only thing I cared about was that she was safe and that I still had my daughter. She's been coming home on Sundays again, every week without fail. My house still stands on the same street in Asheville. Gerald's roses bloomed especially well this year, a deep, full red that you can see from the sidewalk. I take care of them the same way I always have, carefully, patiently, with my own 2 hands. I learned something this year that I want to say plainly, for anyone who needs to hear it. Getting older does not make you a smaller target. If anything, it can make you a larger one, because some people look at a woman of a certain age and assume she is confused, or soft, or too polite to push back. They assume that the years have made her tired, in ways that leave her open. What they miscalculate is this: the years have also made her wise, and prepared, and very, very patient. I did not raise my voice at that birthday dinner. I did not cry. I did not beg anyone to believe me or defend myself with emotion. I simply opened an envelope. Sometimes that is all justice requires. I am 70 years old. I own my home. I have my daughter. I have Helen next door, and Patricia across town, and Robert Finch on speed dial, and I have Gerald's roses. That is more than enough.